better. Right, I'm sitting here with Sarah Thomson, Hamilton West candidate, and actual sitting councillor, one of our cycling friends on the council. And in the past, I've always asked people, why should people vote for you? But in this case, I'm taking a bit of a different angle, and it's basically, with other candidates, it's what would you be doing for the cycling community. But in this case, we can actually talk about what has council done, because council's made a lot of progress in 3 years compared to the last election, and gone quite a distance into the direction we would like them to go in as cyclists. Just if you can give us a bit of an idea of what council's done and what's still in the pipeline that's in progress, and then talk about anything that you think personally that council could do more on, or do that they haven't even started doing yet, that sort of thing.
Okay, cool. So I think this last term has really been about setting the foundations for making a lot of progress around safe cycling. We have seen some stuff on the ground itself. We've seen the upgrade of Ruakura Road. We've seen Ward Street, although there was a bit of a rocky journey to get there.
Claudelands Road.
There's Claudelands Bridge was just before this term.
Just before, was it? Okay.
But there have been a lot of improvements at various intersections where we've put in green paint and hit sticks, or cycle ones, I should probably call them, to stop cars from actually sitting in the cycle lanes. So there's been a lot of smaller projects happening around the place, bike parking going in, that kind of work. But the big stuff is really yet to happen. But what we've done this term is we've developed a business case for a citywide biking and micromobility network. So a comprehensive business case for safe cycling across the whole city, which sets out a plan for over 300 kilometres of safe cycleways. And that would be a mix of really high quality, separated, kind of wide paths to...
Like what's up the side of the university at the moment?
So some of that, I mean, it all when you're retrofitting, it all really depends on how much space you've got and, what you're working with. So
just put in a lot more one-way roads.
There'll be transitional stuff. So to be able to roll out, over 100 kilometres in only 10 years, for example, you want to be able to do stuff quickly. And in a cost-effective way. So part of the plan is to do transitional or interim infrastructure, and that might be putting in your cycle lanes and putting plastic cycle ones all along the side, but then having the plan that in the future, we upgrade that again to something a little more kind of gold-plated. So, but in the meantime, it's 100 times better than what's
makes people feel safe if they're riding. Also, it helps train drivers in the future way roads are going to work. Because that's one of the biggest problems. They've been driving around roads with no real concern for cyclists in a lot of cases. And when something appears, it's like they have to get used to a new way of driving on some of our streets.
They will, and I think we'll see the rollout of more slower neighbourhoods and kind of low traffic neighbourhoods as well. So to do it cost effectively, in some cases, and I've done this in Christchurch, there would be what they call greenways. You might call it a low traffic neighbourhood where you route some of the cycling paths through your quiet back suburban streets, but you kind of have limited traffic volumes going through them and slower speeds of like 30 kilometres an hour and things. So there'll be a mix of infrastructure that's used, and that business case has been endorsed by our council. It is going to Waka Kotahi's board this month.
Okay.
So we're expecting, because the Waka Kotahi staff, really supportive, and we're expecting that to be approved. And that will really open the door to a lot more funding, because this long-term plan, we increased the amount of funding for cycling by a significant amount, and that was supported really well by the community.
Yep.
But we haven't seen a lot of that matched by Waka Kotahi with co-funding.
Okay.
So that's meant that for our biking plan, we've started some implementation, but we're going half as fast as we would if we had that 50% funding. So that's major. Without that business case, we would still be floundering, and we would still struggle to get that co-funding. So,
do you find Waka Kotahi are actually becoming more on board with things than they maybe would have, say, at the beginning of this term, and things like that? Because sometimes these things take a while, and they need groups like that to actually be participating to move it forward, but sometimes it's a bit of a slow start.
I think that there's a lot of really good people within Waka Kotahi. I don't know if all levels of the organisation are quite where they need to be. And, you've seen decisions from them around allocating the limited funding that there is for walking and cycling, which have been controversial, because they've gone and put a huge amount of money to this shared path in Wellington, where most of that money is actually going into a seawall to strengthen a state highway and protect that in the railway line. And so and the bucket of money for walking and cycling that the government sets out through its government policy statement is not that big. It's not big enough. And so it's not just Waka Kotahi. Ultimately, they're working within a funding envelope that is just not big enough to start with. So it does also come back to the government.
So the problem goes back further than them.
Yeah, so what the government minister, transport minister does is every 3 years sets out how the big National Land Transport Fund will be allocated, and he'll say this much goes into the public transport bucket, this much into the state highway bucket, this much into walking and cycling. And walking and cycling as a proportion of the entire transport budget is still minuscule, less than 4%.
Gee.
So it's not enough for transformation at the moment, which has been probably the biggest frustration this term. But putting all that frustration aside, another positive thing that's happened is we did get funding for the school link. So
cool.
The Eastern Pathways project includes the school link and the university link, and the school link connects along Peach Grove and Hukanui, and it connects around 20 schools and thousands of households. So the plan would be to have one really high quality spine going along Hukanui and Peach Grove.
Almost like a cycle highway.
Yep, and then all your connecting neighbourhoods going into that. And that the business case for that was ticked off this term, and we've got funding to get a start on it.
Cool.
So that's really good. So we're going out to, with tenders and starting the work, but it's a little bit of a slow process, particularly with these really big projects where you're going to have a lot of consultation with the community and a lot of back and forth. And again, that's why that transitional stuff is going to be really important as another tool in the toolbox.
Because you're needing to keep people motivated to keep on with this and keep it moving forward. And you're talking about effectively a cycle highway going down Peach Grove Road and Hukanui effectively. Well, see, this is the rail trail that goes along the railway line, beside the railway line. I use that like a highway. Like coming here today, for instance, I could have gone on the road, but because it comes out on Lake Road, I basically followed that from Bryce Street all the way through to Lake Road, and then I was on the road for a short distance. And those things are really good, because a lot of people don't, I don't think, realise that the difference between them is, well, I'm happy to ride on the road, and I don't care if my safety slows down car drivers in the slightest, because sometimes I think a lot more cars should be just pushed off the road, but that's a whole different issue altogether. But when you go on these tracks that have no cars on them and are nice and wide and easy, you don't have to keep looking in your rear vision mirror to see where the cars are. You're not dealing with parked cars. The most you might deal with is someone else on that in front of you. Yeah. You're not needing to look for trucks and buses behind you, and which means you can enjoy the trip a lot more. So I'll often use pieces like that to enjoy the ride more than just getting from place A to B.
Similar. So even though something is less direct, I might choose that path because I remember the first time using the Western Rail Trail, I'd been usually taking a whole different route from the Glenview area into town, and I used it for the first time. And what stood out to me was this immense sense of peace and calm where I didn't arrive feeling like tense and like full of adrenaline and stressed because I'd been watching out for someone who might run over and kill me. So it almost felt like for the first time that I felt included and that I felt like I belonged in the city, because I think so much of the time when you're on your bike, you almost feel like you're being marginalized, like no one gives a about you. And you're stuck between moving, big 2 to 3 ton moving boxes of metal and a hard curb.
and you have to be fully aware. Like, I'm used to it, but the one thing I notice on some of these group rides that you've been on and things like this, and the Glow ride's been postponed till November now, I see. It's not going to be because of tomorrow's weather. Most inconvenient of the weather to screw things up. But anyway, but on these rides, you see people who are only riding because either they're in a group or they just don't ride very much anyway. And I've talked to some that the only reason they're riding is because they're riding in that group. Normally, they would take their bikes to a trail somewhere to ride down. They wouldn't ride on the road. And the only reason they're on the road is because they're with a group of people. And I can see people not fully paying attention to every little thing around them, looking at car drivers and looking at them in the eye when you've got right of way, but you can't just assume that because someone might turn in front of you because they think they can beat you, and taking the lane so that someone can't try and squeeze past you when you're going around a corner. All these sorts of things that I take for granted and do naturally, other people aren't either used to doing, but just doesn't occur to them, or they don't have the confidence to do it. And when you've got more of these trails like the rail trail, this one that's going to be in Peach Grove, the one up by the university, people can ride on those and feel quite comfortable and relaxed. And that's a start to getting people onto the road. As we get more and more of these, then it helps people feel more comfortable. Even on the painted cycle lanes, it then makes them feel, oh yes, I'll feel comfortable riding on that now, and things like this, which is good, because there's a whole lot of reasons which I could spend ages listing why we should encourage cycling, and a lot of people forget that it's not telling people they should ride, it's just making the facilities nice and safe for those people that want to. And I've come across quite a few people who aren't overly vocal and noisy, but they wish they could get back on the road. They just are afraid of being on the road.
100%.
A number of times I get people say, oh, you're lucky to be able to ride around, have to be brave enough to ride on the road and this sort of thing. And I think I've never really thought of it that way. I've just done it all my life. It's no different than someone who's never ridden a bike and has always driven. You don't think about the other options.
Well, I don't know how many times people have said, you're so brave. I would love to, and actually I'm not that brave. But I would love to be able to cycle more. But I just don't feel safe. And it's not, and it's often not people that you in your head think a cyclist. It's really just ordinary, everyday people from all different sorts of backgrounds. And they want to be able to cycle, and it might not be for every journey. And I think there's a really disingenuous kind of attempt from some people to go, oh, we're, here are counsellors or people trying to push people out of their cars, and it's so unrealistic. What about when I need to go and pick up something from Mitre 10? But there's an amazing ad from somewhere in Europe where it says it's the right tool for the right job, so sure, if it's dark and it's raining and I'm going to an event in my nice dress, I'm probably going to drive.
Yeah. It's like when I got a new fridge freezer.
Yeah.
I didn't go, I can't take that home on my bike.
Yeah.
I got it delivered. When I got a new TV, I didn't try and figure out how to get that home on my bike. I organised someone who could do it. I photograph inline hockey. Sometimes for the tournaments, it's bucketing down rain, and it's indoors, so photographing it's fine indoors. It's getting there that's going to be the wet thing, and it's not. I don't have a problem taking an Uber. I always hope it's going to be fine because I would rather ride, because I get into a very calm photography mindset on the way there, which I don't do in a car quite the same. So I always hope it's going to be fine, but if it isn't, I go, I'll have to take an Uber. And often it's not unusual for hockey players to give me a lift home, so I don't actually Uber home. They go, how did you get... They don't see my bike chained up to its regular tree, and they go, how did you get here? I just called an Uber. We'll give you a lift home. In some European places, there's a lot of business. Plumbers that ride around on cargo bikes. And we've got a courier here that's got quite a good courier business on a cargo bike. Well, actually, I think he's up to about 2 cargo bikes now. And this sort of thing. And yes, we're a bit behind the times with these things. But if you look at what you can do, and it comes back to that key thing of going, I would prefer to do it this way because it's less costly, less pollution. At least during summer, I get to enjoy the ride. Yes, I might have a van for winter, but during summer, I quite like the riding to clients to do whatever I'm doing. And yes, you might have to organise something else for getting materials to a building site and something like that. But if all you're taking is yourself and a small bag of a belt of tools, do you really need to be in a car by yourself to go there? And if you prefer to ride, that option should be easy for you to choose. Yeah,
and actually, the arborist that came and helped prune our tree the other day, he said when he was living in Hamilton and it felt a little safer, I guess, there's more and more cars on the road and more crazy driving than ever before, I think. But he would actually use his bike for doing all of his quotes and everything, and so he'd go out to the clients and do the quotes and stuff, but then he would have his truck for the actual jobs, and so he never needed to own a car. So there's ways to also use a mix of vehicles and things. I was just going to say, should I go over a couple more things that are happening?
Because people will be interested to know what's happening, because that's the idea of this, is for people who want to keep these things moving forward, to know what's going on.
So some more exciting stuff. So bridges, obviously Peacock, there's going to be a walking and cycling bridge or connections there that are separated.
Cool.
And there's also the bikes on pipes, a proposal which is very much likely going ahead. And that will be in the new Peacock area where they're doing putting wastewater pipes over gullies. They're going to also at the same time kind of up-spec them a bit, and they'll put separated
so effectively you've got to put pipes across, so you might as well put a bridge across.
Might as well utilise it as a bike bridge as well. So and so that's really cool, because it's going to be some really beautiful cycle paths through there with those gullies. We've got so the bridge for the kind of Hamilton East Central City connection, where currently Anzac Parade Bridge or Victoria Bridge is. Work's continuing on that. We're working on a business case for it as part of the university link, but there's also the potential that it could be funded through our infrastructure acceleration bid for the central city. So we've included it as part of the overall bid to increase housing in the central city, and it's seen as I guess a really important part of that overall package, along with increasing your water capacity and putting in reservoirs and things. People actually need easy connections to get to the school across the river for people to be able to get around.
So it's looking at the cycling options not as a separate thing, but as
supporting housing,
part of everything else. So that. Because this, I think some people have actually done this. They've separated things into separate things. There's housing, there's roading, there's this. When in actual fact, they do need to be looked at as a combined solution a lot more than they have in the past.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, people, when they think of growth, they think of greenfield areas and you need to build a new road to then allow more housing. Here, we're saying, well, actually, we don't need to build a new road, but we need to give people better public transport and better walking and cycling options if we want more people to live in our more built-up areas. So it's a different way of approaching growth. So we're crossing fingers because that would be extremely exciting to get that underway. Because right now it's it really is a hotspot for accidents, that bridge. And it's a real weak link. I mean, the stuff around it's not great either. But
you got two dodgy intersections. The one that comes off Anzac onto was it Grey Street, and the one that effectively you've got Victoria Street. Then you've got the courthouse roundabout, and even I avoid the courthouse roundabout at certain parts of the day. It's either got to be dead slow or chronically busy, so all the cars are at a standstill. And I love that when cars come to a standstill. I've gone up beside, been recognised someone I know, and gone tap on their roof, wave goodbye as I zoom past them. And I do get a certain sense of enjoyment out of that.
No, I mean, one of the reasons I like riding is just because I hate getting stuck in traffic. But so there's some really good stuff bubbling away, and
cool.
Probably, the reason why I'm so keen to be re-elected, please vote, is to actually make sure that a lot of this work continues, because we've set the foundations, we've got the plans, we've got the business cases, we're starting to get stuff out there, but we're going to need really good leadership and really good people around the table to get a lot of these projects actually delivered.
And you've got a kid that's only a term or two away from riding a bike on the road.
So my son's nearly 2.5, and he loves riding on my bike. I mean, one of the things I would love to see is him to be able to ride his bike to school.
And 2 terms from now, he'll be in that age of wanting to do that. And I remember when I was a kid and it was normal to ride to school and bike racks were full as far as the eye could see. It was a sense of freedom you got, that you could ride to school, you could dilly-dally, you could ride to a mate's place on the way home and stuff like this, and you weren't just being picked up at the gate and taken home or whatever. It gave you a sense of freedom that came with you weren't at home with mum all day or whatever.
It's independence, right? Our younger people deserve to have independence, and actually
we
safe. Forget that there's a whole group of people who do not drive in our city, and now they're kind of stuck being reliant on all the people around them to chauffeur them around, and so I think. Another thing you reminded me, Lance, was that we've started a school travel planning pilot.
Oh, cool.
And this has been something that I've been hot on for probably 2 years, and And it became clear that to be able to get a pilot underway, we needed extra funding.
Yeah.
So,
sort of like those walking buses. That's similar.
Yeah, so it's part of it. So what we've done is in the annual plan, we've funded 2 part-time positions, and those 2 people will each work with a group of schools, one on the east and one on the west, and it will be a cluster of schools that are close to each other geographically.
Yeah.
And they'll work with them on a plan which addresses maybe some key safety issues in terms of infrastructure, but also work with the students on things that would encourage or enable them to get to school in a different way. So that might be your walking school buses, your bike trains. It could be something as simple as actually getting parents to drop the kids off 500 metres away at a gathering point and then walking to school from there.
Oh, okay.
So it's not necessarily you have to go all the way from home to school, but right now one of the congestion and just bad driving behaviour, bad parking behaviour outside of our schools.
Yeah, cycle past any school at the beginning
issue.
of the day or the end of the day, and you find out you avoid those roads normally.
So it's addressing safety, and it's also hopefully going to reduce the overall number of car trips as well. I mean, congestion, we all know, at school time is worse. And
unless you're on a bike,
you compare it to your school. Yeah, exactly. You compare it to your school holidays, and it's about 36% worse in terms of delay in the morning. So
not having kids, sometimes that's the only way I know we're in school holidays. I go down certain roads, and there's no kids around. So
that's something I'm very excited about, because if it's successful, then we would be able to have I guess the data that backs up, expanding that program out to other schools. And, a lot of them are really keen to participate. So,
cool.
It's exciting.
Well, I took some photographs at the Peak, which whatever school it is over there, over Road to Turnaway. And when I pulled up, I'd never been there before. Yeah. I was quite surprised at the catering for bikes outside.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, where do I chain my bike up? It's like, there's heaps of space here. Yeah. But just before we finish, in 10 or so years, do you think Hamilton could become, if we keep progressing, could become a leading example of what you can do? Because we are, the 4th biggest city in New Zealand. So therefore, we're big enough to say, well, okay, if you can do it in Hamilton, you can do it in other places. Do you think we could become that example so that people can look at us and go, oh, if Hamilton can do it, surely we can?
100%. I think at this stage what we just need is the good leadership to get us there.
Yeah.
Because it won't necessarily always be a smooth journey to get there. But once you have the facilities in and people start using them and they start seeing them used, I think then you will get more momentum. And it could be really exciting.
The whole concept of build it and they will come sort of thing. And I think there are people that are, like for instance, Electrify and a couple of other places have mentioned that they've had a rise in the sale of e-bikes.
Yeah.
And the majority of those customers have been on the older side, 45, 50 upwards. So they're people that wouldn't walk across Hamilton, but will now cycle across Hamilton instead of driving. In the past, because of age and you get a bit knackered after certain ages, and they'd have to drive these places where there's nothing wrong with them cycling. They can ride a bike okay and things like this. It's not like they're disabled or anything. It's just you get a bit tired after a couple of hours of walking. You might get a little bit knackered. So riding an e-bike has made things easier for them.
Well, I think what's, along with infrastructure improving, what's really opening up cycling to a lot of people is now the range of choices that they have. So I use an e-bike because I can get to meetings quickly without getting too puffed, and I can get right across the city if I feel safe enough doing it. Yeah. Often I don't. and I can put my son on, even though he's an extra 15 kgs, and still feel like, it's not a big chore. There's cargo bikes, there's trikes for people with disabilities, and it's really, I think, it's opening up opportunities for people. And I think that the more that people see bikes being used in different ways, the more that they see children on them, or cargo bikes, or
trailers,
all of that, then they realize, it's, actually these can be really used in a really diverse way for lots of different functions. I can carry my groceries, I can carry my kids.
And people can look at something and go, hey, that would be a solution for how I could do this. The one thing I think council needs to spend a bit of time on, and some of the things they've done, I've wondered if the people who've designed them ever rode a bike.
Yeah.
Is there's a few spots. I've talked to someone in the council who deals with the certain cycle lanes and stuff, is catering for the different bikes, because I think they've thought of just an ordinary bike. They're not thinking of cargo bikes or bikes with trailers. Ward Street is a good example. That piece that goes from Victoria Street onto Claudelands Bridge, there's a couple of things about that don't quite fit with a bike with a trailer if you're coming off Ward Street or getting into that, because there's one bit that's a little bit narrow. Those bollard things are just in the wrong place, and it's a little bit tight going through there.
100%.
And there's a few other places like that, like, for instance, some of the separated cycle lanes where, yes, they're brilliant, but the concrete bits are quite close together. So if you have to go around an obstacle in the cycle lane, like a big pile of broken glass, it's really tricky getting out and around. Where's just a little bit more of a gap that's big enough to zoom through with a bike and then come back in, but not big enough for a car to get in there, I think would be good. I don't know if the people who design these things actually ride bikes.
They do.
I wonder sometimes.
That.
Oh, that's good.
I think that's where community feedback keeps being so important, because the more feedback that comes in from how people use things and what their experience has been using it, the more that will inform how we design things going forward. So our transport strategy, which we've just ticked off, one of the key things in there is inclusivity, and we want it to be usable for everyone. So designers won't always think of everything, and that's where, going back to community groups, getting feedback, so important.
And that's one of the things I've found with this council in particular. They have actually listened to groups like Bike Hamilton, Bike Waikato, these different groups like that, and listened to what they're saying and taking some of that on board. And they've worked quite close with some to work out maps of spots that need, for instance, bike racks, and like there's just on this piece of street here where my bike's chained to a pole because there's no bike park, right? And it's noticing where these places are, where the existing bike racks could be better, and things like this. Because, to be honest, the council can't do as good a job as they could if they don't get feedback from people. And so we, as users of the bikes, or people who wish to use a bike, have some responsibility to speak up and mention to council things that need to be changed or put in or done differently, or this sort of thing, so that
there's
they know.
Valuable knowledge out there, and it's about, I think, us making it as easy as possible to send that information in. So that, and an example is, in some places we have signs which say, cyclists dismount. Well, we just heard from a cyclist who uses a trike, and because he has a disability, he, it's difficult for him to actually get off and push his bike.
Yeah.
So that suddenly excludes him from using those paths because he can't get off and dismount. So,
do you want to know a little secret? I actually ignore those signs. I just change how I ride. Like when I come to a cyclist dismount, like for instance going across, if it's a narrow path, I just change how I ride. I don't ride at normal pace. I ride basically at walking pace, but I'm still sitting on the seat because I take up less room sitting on the bike. That's why I've never seen the sense of these cyclists dismount, because a cyclist standing beside a bike takes up the equivalent of 2 bike spaces.
Yeah.
Whereas if I'm sitting on the bike, just going at walking speed, I take up less space. And being respectful of others, like coming up behind people who are spread across the footpath, not trying to squeeze past them, not doing the things that I don't like car drivers doing. So it's, I can just squeeze past there with no warning, let them know I'm there. If they move out of the way, fine. If they don't, I'll just go at walking pace until I've got a gap.
Yeah, I have to say, we've got some work to do too around culture.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's both people, it's everyone using our shared paths. In some cases, there's just not the room to have wonderful separated facilities. Would be mowing down, trees and all sorts to be able to get them in there. So
that one by the university is a good example. The only reason that exists because there's a big space on that side of the road.
But the river path, we're really constrained. And so eventually getting some people on bikes who want to go fast on a parallel path will be ideal. But people need to be really conscientious and respectful. And there's some issues there that we're going to have to really try and address.
This is where I think education could come in handy. If council worked out some way that they could have some sort of help new cyclists be more confident and understand the best way and safest way to ride. Things like don't go zooming around tight corners without ringing a bell or something like that, so people know all these sorts of things that often don't occur to people would be good, because the biggest problem with a lot of this is people that aren't cycling enough to have developed these procedures themselves. A lot of it comes down to respect for other users of the footpath or whatever it happens to be, and understanding that sometimes, even though you might have right of way on a bike on the road, you have to stop and slow and let the cars go past. Like crossing the bridge today, I technically could have gone onto the sharrow piece on the bridge and gone across and just kept on going, but the cars weren't that far behind me, but it was safe to do so. But instead of doing that, I waited for the cars to go past until there was a big empty space. You couldn't see a car for a mile. Then I went. And that was just purely because it meant I wasn't slowing the cars down and they could get across. And I knew there was going to be a gap because I knew that they were there because there was a lights change. So I knew there was going to be a gap for me eventually. I just had to wait about 60 seconds for them to get past me.
Yeah, we want to foster respect from everyone, and annoying people is not always the best way to get the community on board with.
No, I will take the lane when I'm going around some corners to stop cars cutting around and squeezing me into the but that's for my own safety, and it makes common sense, right? And I will ride out away from cars and going down the main street to avoid getting collected by a door, while at the same time looking in the driver's seat to see if there's anyone in there, right? And that's because you need to do those things. But being sensible is generally the best option. But
I'm crossing fingers. We're losing some fantastic champions this term with people standing down. So please, I guess my message would be that vote, but get the people around you to vote and look really closely at who you're voting for. And vote strategically. Only tick the people that only rank the people that you want. Because we need the leadership there to keep things moving. And
I'll say what you can't, because I can say this. Look at the people who are supporting cycling, and if you want the cycling initiatives to progress, look at voting for those people. If everything else lines up for you with that particular candidate, try and put them on council to keep the momentum going, because we've got a good running start. I think we just need to keep the momentum going. It's not a sprint. It's going to be a bit of a marathon to get to where we want to go, but it is possible with the right people on council and that sort of thing, like yourself, for instance. So well, thanks very much for your time. And
thank you.
and
cheers.
and good luck with the election and
thank you.
And that sort of thing. So yeah, cool. Thanks.
Thanks.